Here's Gaza. Every Jew got out in 2005-6. The Bush administration said we support elections, even if Hamas wins. Hamas wins. They threw the Palestinian Authority opposition off rooftops, ethnically cleansed all of them, got them out, sent them back over to the West Bank, said this is ours, and they had 20 years to create an Emirates on the Mediterranean. No Israeli was going to bother them. They had tons of UN food, money, Gulf money. All they had to do was one thing. Just say, you know what? I don't care about Israel. We got Gaza. We have the West Bank. We're going to show the Jews that we can make this paradise on earth, and then we can adjudicate maybe a border change once we are in a position of respect, honor, and wealth. And all they had to do was that. And immediately they took the money, they diverted it, started building the tunnels, and started killing Jews.
Hello, ladies. Hello, gentlemen. Welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. We are recording on Sunday, the 10th of August, and this particular episode will be up on Thursday, the 14th. I'm Jack Fowler. I'm in a strange place right now, but we're making it work. But who cares about me? Because you're here to hear and to listen to and to see Victor Davis Hanson, the star of the show, who is the Martin and Ely Anderson Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marsha Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College, and a man with the website, The Blade of Perseus. Go there, victorhanson.com. Check it out. You'll see so much stuff, and you'll want to subscribe. $65 discounted from $6.50 a month. That gives you access to all the things Victor writes and the videos he does exclusively for The Blade of Perseus. What are we going to talk about today, Victor? You know what? Let's start off with one of the heroes, I think, of this second Trump administration, and that's Lee Zeldin, who's done some terrific stuff with EPA regulations. And we've got one of our favorite Congress people, women, Nancy Pelosi, and she's fighting for kids for their sex change surgeries. Please, why doesn't she just retire? We've got that. We've got many more issues to get your wisdom on. We'll get to all that when we come back from these important messages. We're back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor, we'll kick this off with Lee Zeldin, and I'm reading from a piece in UN1, a great website, UNWON, titled Trump's EPA Moving to End Federal Regulation of Greenhouse Gases. And here's the first few lines from the story. In one of the most sweeping deregulatory actions in U.S. history, the Trump administration is set to end the federal government's authority to regulate carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases. On Tuesday, this would have been about 10 days ago from when this podcast is up, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin announced plans to repeal the EPA's 2009 endangerment finding, revoking the agency's power to regulate 6 greenhouse gas emissions under the Clean Air Act. This would also end the Biden-Harris administration's electric vehicle mandate. If finalized, today's announcement would amount to the largest deregulatory action in the history of the United States, Zeldin said. Viva Lee Zeldin. What do you think, Victor?
I think he's thinking of Europe and Europe's collective suicide. And what he's basically saying, the subtext is that China is producing somewhere between 20 and 30 new dirty coal, bituminous coal plants and lignite, and they are, in addition to their use of, other fuels, natural gas, which is, I guess the EPA says, the old EPA said is a pollutant that emits heat, but oil and all of these diesel fuels. So basically, if you look at a chart of emissions, what Europe has done to vastly curtail its oil and natural gas and coal production and go to wind and solar has not really marginally affected total global emissions. It's really markedly affected European, but because of the size of China, 1.4 billion people, and its gung-ho idea that it's going to use any type of cheap fuel that it can, and given it feels that the West will go under Biden and the EU was going into renewable solar and wind and EVs, that basically the rest of the world would get cheap fossil fuels, and as an extra bonus, the West would cripple and neuter itself, and China and India and other countries would be much more competitive because they would be using much cheaper sources of electrical generation. And that's what was happening. And so when you look at Europe, its cost, which is ahead of us, believe it or not, on wind and solar. But a good example is California, which was trying to brag for a few hours not long ago that in the daytime it almost had achieved with people's solar panels on their homes, these huge new solar and wind farms, self-sufficiency in renewables without, and they were counting hydroelectric as well, without telling us that at night we are a vast importer of energy, and often it's coal produced. But we in California pay about double the average of electricity nationwide. We're like Europe. And so that's one of the reasons that we don't talk about why Tesla and all these other companies are leaving California. It wasn't just a regulatory punishment that the government dishes out, but it was the cost of power, gasoline to get to work, diesel to, deliver products, and electricity to make things. It's so expensive here. So what Lee Zeldin is basically saying is we're not going to be like Europe. They're falling apart. Their GDP used to be pretty much what ours was 25 years ago, and now it's only 2/3. And that's attributable to their declining fertility rate, their exorbitant price of energy, their open borders and huge social cost of illegal immigration from the Islamic world. And we're not going to do it. And at least as far as the hyper-regulation and wind and solar. And the beneficiaries are whom? The middle class.
Yeah.
The middle class.
Two things, yeah. Well, you don't have power, you have poverty. And why the bleeding hearts don't see that, or maybe they see it, maybe they relish it, actually. It's one thing. The other thing, Victor, you just mentioned California. I wrote a piece for National Review the other day. I think you mentioned before the forthcoming closing of 2 refineries in the state is going to cut gasoline availability by 20%. You already have this new tax going, and that's going to add 65 cents a gallon. The cut of the fuel is just going to make it, I don't know, what is it going to be, like $9-10 a gallon? Can you imagine that someday in California for gasoline?
Yeah, something's got to give. It's like, here's the state, and you're pulling at it in every direction. What do I mean by that? You're driving out oil refineries, you're raising the price of gas, you're putting the great Monterey Shale Basin off limits, the very rich Naval Reserve fields in the Bakersfield area are declining in output. The offshore, I think we only have 10 or 11 platforms left. They're reaching, even with increased horizontal drilling, they're reaching their limits, and production is going down. So production of fossil fuels is going down radically. Refineries are leaving because of the regulation. The taxes are going up. Silicon Valley and other types of businesses are fleeing the state. The state has, in response, raised their taxes from 10 to 11 to 12 to 13.3 on the top rates income tax. The property taxes are very high, not because of the percentage, but because the assessments are so high. The electricity, as I said, is way over 30 cents a kilowatt at certain times. And nobody can live if you're middle class. And we also have the most generous welfare benefits. So half the state is on half of the deliveries of newborns or Medi-Cal, and 40% of the state is on Medi-Cal, and 21% lives below the the poverty line, and 1/3 of all recipients nationwide who get federal entitlements are in California, which only has 1/6 of the population. So you can see what I'm getting at. The professional class and the middle classes are leaving. The rich who have big, beautiful homes along the coast and it's the wealthiest state. They've traditionally made a fortune in California. They don't care about what the price is. If you tell somebody in Montecito or Malibu or Carmel that the price of gas is going to go to 7 or 8, they said, that's good. There'll be less people bugging my estate. If you say, well, to turn on your sprinklers or something, it's going to be exorbitant, the electricity. I don't care. I don't need these people. That's their attitude. And then the poor, who are mostly immigrants, first and second generation, mostly from south of the border, they have traditionally said, it's fine with me. I get free health care. My kids are born free. I get housing supplements. My kids get affirmative action. It's a big welfare state. And here's the unknown. And that is, as I said, about 45% in this majority state is Hispanic. And we don't know what that means anymore. Third generation, second generation first. But we do know this, that the majority of high-paying jobs in the state bureaucracy and many of the mid-level companies are increasingly staffed by Hispanics, and they are becoming the establishment, but they're not the wealthy establishment, so they are paying anywhere from 9 to 12% income tax. They are living in areas where they see new illegal immigrants come in and get free stuff. They can see they have to pay the tax, and they're saying, oh my gosh, my own Democratic Party hates me now. They used to like me because I'm Hispanic and gave me special privileges. Now they hate me because I'm middle class and upper middle class, and they think I'm just a piggy bank. And I don't care who the guy is that's getting free stuff. I don't want to pay for it anymore. And I don't care who these wealthy people are that patronize me. They're the ones that are behind this radical environmental craziness. And I don't like them either. And we'll see how they break. But Gavin Newsom thinks that he's got them in his pocket, that Hispanics vote as Hispanics and therefore as Democrats and therefore as left-wingers. And he's going to redistrict a state that has about 40% vote for Trump, 38, 39 maybe, and it only has about 20% Republican congressional districts. And I think out of the 53, they're down to 10 or 11. And he thinks that he's going to be a crusader by doing what, Gavin? You put your head on the guillotine. He thought, I'm going to be really the tough guy and beat my chest and say, Texas, what you're doing, I'm going to counteract because I'm bigger than you are, and we're going to redistribute. But the problem is that it was reform movements, Democrats and Republicans, that made this state supposedly nonpartisan redistricting commission. And of course, as Democrats do, they hijacked it and inserted leftists in it and redistrict. If you look at our districts, they look like jigsaw puzzles. And they ensured that Republicans would only have half the congressional seats and maybe only, 65% of the state legislature seats that they deserve by their numbers. And so now Gavin is basically going to do two things, Jack. He's going to go back to the people of California, and he's going to say, I want to throw out this constitutional amendment passed by ballot and abolish the nonpartisan redistrict commission, which we hijacked and made it partisan. But it wasn't partisan enough, because I want to ensure that California goes from 20% Republican representation when they have 40% by population down to 10 or maybe 0. And I don't think that's going to sell. I really don't. He should be saying right now to his Democratic friends that are fleeing to Chicago, hey, everybody, you should do what we did. We've solved the problem. Texas is going to redistribute its, but they won't ever be as successful as we were. We really got the Republicans. They had 40% almost. They only have 20%. We did that. We hijacked the nonpartisan commission. It was a brilliant idea. But he can't do that. He's so greedy, and he's running for office, so he has to double down on double down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's shameless.
What's
he going to do? He's going to brag that when he runs for president under Gavin Newsom's direction, the California congressional delegation went from being 20% Republican down to 10%. I don't think that's a good message.
It's a complete and total annihilation of your enemies seems to be what motivates them. So, Victor, here's a headline. Pelosi working, quote unquote, working for sex change surgeries nationally. This is a Newsmax story. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat, California, said she's fighting for sex changes surgery on the national level, while at San Francisco VA Medical Center on Thursday, that would have been a week ago from today when we're airing, where she reviewed health system upgrades, Pelosi was asked how her office was responding to pauses in gender transitioning surgeries in California. Quote, that is something I'm working for at the national level, and we are hoping that we can have gender-affirming care for our trans kids, Pelosi told reporters. Victor, the priority of Nancy Pelosi is slicing off body parts of boys and girls. It's well, not a surprise.
That's one priority. Yeah. The main priority is talking to her husband about confidential information of where the next federal project is going to be located in California, where the on-ramp's going to be, where the off-ramp, what the zoning's going to be, what the building's going to be, or what the interest rate's going to be, so he can act accordingly in anticipation and turn the Pelosi family income from maybe $1 million to a net worth of 100 or 200 million in palatial residences. That's the real priority. I listened to her. I couldn't understand. I felt bad for her. Did you see that clip?
I did see it. Yeah.
She was so confused. I don't even think she knew what gender affirming care is. She hesitated. She was lost.
She was Biden-esque, almost.
I'm 71, and I forget names sometimes, but there's a problem with this geriatric chauvinism. We're not supposed to say something, but to the degree it's age-related. I mean, I listened to Charles Grassley. The guy is, 92 or something? Or he sounds sharp as a tack, to use that Biden inappropriate. I'm not saying, and Warren Buffett and all these people are, no problem, but gosh, she is cognitively impaired. She really is. And I don't know what she says she's going to do this. She's not the speaker anymore. I don't know what influence she has. She seems to be increasingly irrelevant. She's not at the pulse of the party, which is the Jasmine Crockett lunatic base. And I don't know what she means by gender-affirming care. If her 16-year-old, or say her 15-year-old granddaughter goes to school and is told that transitioning is something everybody considers, and she goes up to Nancy and says, I think I need my breast removed surgically, what would Nancy do? And she said, I think she would have a fit. Gender affirming, it's not affirming gender, it's a radical surgery that can remove vital anatomy that will change a person's health for the rest of their lives. And it's not in isolation. It's accompanied by very dangerous drugs, hormones and whatnot, and in some cases steroids and stuff. So I thought the left was always warning us about over-medication and too many surgeries and doctor activism that gets in the way of prudent integrative medicine. And suddenly, if it's, that's so, everybody should realize what's scary about the left is they control the media and the popular culture, and that popular culture and media can serve as a retardant or a brake on popular passion. So if you're a Republican or conservative, the first idea that gets in your head, they will attack you, and they'll attack you unfairly. But one result of it is, if you're a conservative, you have to be very careful what you say and think, because they pounce. and they go after you. If you're a Democrat, though, they just give you free rein, and that just encourages wild stuff. It's the same thing about tampering with the environment. There was a story that off the coast, the California Central Coast, they're thinking about ways of blocking the sun to decrease global warming. I thought that tampering with the environment, whether it's creating coronaviruses in the lab or doing things like that, is very, very dangerous. But because it's left, if some right-wing guy said, I've got a plan and I have a gold mine and it's off the grid, so I have this big wind turbine I'm going to use, and it's going to create the electricity for my mining operation to get gold. And there's going to be golden eagles and ospreys that are going to go through it and get shredded. They wouldn't allow that in 2 seconds. But because you're left wing, there's no scrutiny over wind or solar or any of that stuff, or even pollution or dangerous experimentation. It's the same thing with the mRNA booster. All of a sudden, they declared that was the thing to get a booster, and nobody really understood the spike protein or the after effects on some people or immune-compromised people. And you can really see it in the Soviet Union. It was a people's republic, and they just dumped nuclear waste anywhere they wanted. And their basic attitude is, what are you going to do? And I can tell you, when I drive in California and you see Caltrans and they know that the left controls the state, they don't take a lot of care about signs that say under construction or bumps in the road or open trenches at the side of the road, because their attitude is basically, we're the king and the king is law and we're left, and they're not going to do anything to us because we're the state. Whereas if they were a private contractor, they'd be sued left and right. And at some point, somebody's got to pay for all this. And if you demonize all these wealthy people and they're leaving, and you keep going at it, it's even Gavin, he had to back down from giving free health care to more illegal aliens. And he's worried now that we've had the most illegal aliens in the country. As I said, half of the births, and the Medi-Cal budget is just consuming a huge proportion that used to go to infrastructure. And yet he can't cross that constituency, and yet he knows that it's not going to work financially. And Gavin Newsom's whole strategy, I got to get out of Dodge before it falls apart. And I just hope that it doesn't fall. It was kind of like Mike Dukakis. Remember, he kind of ruined Massachusetts, and he said, I was the governor of Massachusetts. It wasn't ideological. I was competent. Everybody hated the left at that point. And then he called it the Massachusetts Miracle, and it worked pretty well in the primary and the first thing against George Bush. And then it started coming in, and they ran wait a minute, Boston Harbor's filthy dirty. Man, Willie Horton just gets out of that revolving door. That was in addition to him bobblehead in the tank. But it didn't last long enough. The Miracle blew up, and then he was considered not competent. If he wasn't competent, that was about the end for him.
By the way, I'm glad you mentioned the shredded birds and bald eagles, because if you owned a bald eagle feather at one point, maybe even now, you could
you can't have one. No.
But you can kill them, and whales, right? Weren't whales the great and should be, save Willie, free Willie, but these turbines, windmills they're putting in the ocean.
They interfere with their natural sonar.
Yeah. But it's okay.
Do that. They interrupt bird migration. I mean, birds, when they want to go from the coast to the Central Valley, they follow natural depressions in the landscape called passes. And passes are where the wind is tunneled through from different barometers and stuff. So whether it's the Ultimate Pass or Pacheco Pass or down by Palm Springs, that's where the wind machines are, and that's where a lot of birds fly.
So the slaughter happens.
Get torn up.
Yeah. Insane. Well, Victor, we're going to take a little break, and when we come back from that, we're going to talk about Judge Boasberg getting smacked down, and maybe we'll talk about, we have a couple of Donald Trump using troops wanting to use them against drug cartels and wanting to use them within the District of Columbia, and we'll do all that when we come back from these important messages.
Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plumb, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen. Made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body, found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. Type 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything. Coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. And you can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. Visit getnativepath.com/Victor and start your transformation today. That is GETNATIVEPATH.com/VICTOR. I personally love the PM Collagen formula with melatonin. It's given me many nights of great sleep, and the electrolyte drink mix for my water at workouts. They are my friends, and I'm sure they will be yours.
We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show, recording on Sunday the 10th, and this episode is up on, let me get my calendar straight, Thursday the 14th, and I'm grateful father and father-in-law doing this from my daughter Elizabeth's house. Thank you kindly, my sweet daughter, and her brilliant husband, Ben. Victor, I want to mention before we get these topics, we talk sometimes about angels, and Joe N., who helps administer the Victor Davis Hanson fan club on Facebook, is Orthodox. And, I don't know how Swedish Protestants, how many angels they think of, but we think generally Christians, we thought, Michael, the Archangel, and
You've
Gabriel.
corrected me on the number and the nature and the nomenclature of angels on a number of occasions.
Yes, but now I'm admitting my own ignorance, because there's a broader Christianity than just what I believe in. So Joe, who is again Orthodox, says there are within the Greek tradition at least 7 angels: Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel. Those are the ones we all also agree with, and then Chamuel, Jophiel, and Zadkiel. I hope I pronounced those right. And then someone else sent me something about an archangel named Jegudiel, who is venerated in Eastern Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy. So I'm very intrigued by this. I'm going to study more, but I wanted to make a correction, or admission at least of my ignorance of angels. So I think we talked.
Curious. I think I told you that on Black Tuesday, May 29th, 28th, at around noon, 1453, the Emperor Mehmet's troops broke through the Theodosian walls, and they ran the 5 or 6 miles through the streets of Constantinople, killing civilians, and the 7,000 of them were locked in safety in the sanctuary of Hagia Sophia, the greatest church in Christendom devoted to holy wisdom. And they were praying for the archangels to come down. But according to your friends' exegesis, there was not just 4, there was 8. So they had some power. Why didn't they come as called down to save everybody from the Muslim killers? Because the Paleogloi, the last emperor, he was marbleized according to Greek Orthodox traditions and taken away in a state of perpetual suspended animation. And at some point when Constantinople, which it almost was in 1921, is restored to its Christian roots, he will be reanimated. But they had a lot of archangels, is what I'm telling you, and yet one of them could have volunteered to come down and save them from the Islamic so-called hordes. By the way, do you know what the word angelos comes from? An angel? Yes, it's a Greek word, and it doesn't mean that he's divine. Angelos means a messenger and an announcer. So all angeloi are announcers. And why do we get the word Anglo, which is a dirty word now? Because when the Romans reportedly went into parts of the British Isles especially, they found people who were really weird looking, pure white. They had never seen any, but Germans were white, but these people had white hair. They were kind of like elves in Tolkien. And they thought, well, because the Angeloi in Scripture are radiant, these people must look like Angeloi, so we'll call them Angles.
Really? That's
messengers.
fascinating. Wow.
Yeah, that's disputed, that etymology, but I think that's the correct one. I'll check it when this is over.
I think the praying Greeks should have sent for the Swedish mercenaries to that might have prevailed.
Anglo was a really dirty word when I was a young kid, because as I said before, I went to a predominantly Hispanic Eric White school on the west side, about a
Gringo
mile
Hanson, right?
Yeah, about a mile and a half from where I'm speaking. And even in those days, there was 10 to 12 non-Hispanic kids, because it was on the so-called barrio side. And I should have gone to a rural school called Terry School, but my mother thought it would be good to be integrative and to get a real life experience. And I had great teachers, by the way. I got a great education, but they had a lot of pejorative words. One was Okie. You got, hey, you're a Okie, or you're a gringo was the most common, or white boy. But they also said Anglo. Hey, Anglo. And I don't know where they got that, Anglo. And that was one of the first words I learned of being white, Anglo, and a dirty word. You're an Anglo. Anglos have it,
Didn't they elect the Anglo as the freshman class president in high school, though? Were you not the freshman class president?
That was very funny. I was a junior, and I was vice president. I was a senior, as vice president of the student body, and the president was so-called white, but there was a really contested election for the next student body president between a Hispanic person and a white person. At that time, Selma High School, which was not like my feeder school, it was represented the entire community, and it was about 50-50 or maybe 60% Hispanic, not 90 as it is now. In any case, my colleague who was a student body president as a senior backed the white candidate, and I backed the Hispanic candidate. I really liked him. I thought he was the better qualified. And the only thing is, he appealed to numbers, like Latino solidarity, and they thought that was unfair. So it was a disputed election. And so I was his representative, and my colleague who was the student body president was the other candidates, and it was kind of deadlocked. And everybody didn't trust. There was accusations that everybody was stuffing the ballot. So the box was locked in the principal's office, and the principal read us all of the complaints of stuffing. And he said, right now, I want to know Mr. Hanson and Mr. I won't name his name. I still know him, the president. He said, they didn't let the candidates come in because they didn't want them arguing. He said, you are the representative, the campaign managers of each. And I was. So they said, do you want me to open this box? And I said, yes. There's no evidence. There was none of tampering. And the other guy said, yeah, we won. Everybody knows we won. So they opened it, we counted, and the so-called white candidate lost. And immediately he said, no, that's not fair. Victor's wrong. It's not fair. I said, well, you agreed. Well, these things were been tampered, and his father was on the school board. He said, I'm calling my dad immediately. And I gave this really impassioned, self-righteous, snotty little speech about, I said, you're arguing that people are trying to use undue influence because they're Hispanic. And it was right during the beginning of affirmative action. And there had been a lot of people angry because there were 3 or 4 people who were going to UC campuses who did not have a 3.5 average who were Hispanic, and 3 or 4 who didn't get in who were white who did. So affirmative action. But I said, you guys are all angry about affirmative action, but you're doing affirmative action too. You're saying that because your dad's on the school board and you're white, that you can change the rules, but you can't. We have to abide by your word. And we had to sign a little thing too and so he didn't speak to me for the rest of the year he was so angry. And when we had a Mexican-American president, he was just as good or bad as anybody else. The next year we had a black president. He was really good. I knew him really well. So this was supposed to be the height of racism in Central Valley. No, it was poor whites from Oklahoma, Mexican-Americans, blacks. They all got along pretty well, as I remember. And we had 1972, there was a Hispanic president. 1973, I think there was a black president, student body. And we had the year ahead of me, there was a brilliant black woman who was our vice president. So it was pretty much, you don't hear about any of in the revisionist history of the dark days and racist days of America, but 50 years ago, it was not quite what everybody thinks it was.
I have to read an ad, but your story there is a wonderful story, and it kind of reminds me a little of Napoleon Dynamite, the movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Victor, but
was that the one with the pig?
No.
I thought there was some...
No, but it's about about a high school election and vote for Pedro, and check it out some point. It's a pretty fun movie. Victor, hey, here's a headline: Appeals Court panel quashes Judge Boasberg's contempt proceedings over Alien Enemies Act deportations. Victor, your thoughts on the quashing of Boasberg, and I wonder, will he ever behave?
What's your point?
Well, he's been put in his place by the appeals court, but I think he's a man who thinks he's going to do what he wants to do anyway.
There's 750 of these judges, Jack, lower district court, and I think the estimates I've read are 400 of them to 450 are left wing. And you and I would never have heard of this guy, right? I've never heard of him before this year. Have you? And now we're talking about him. And we're talking about him in a lot of context. So I think your point is that they don't really care what the law is. They do know one thing, that if they stay for a month, 3 months, and they cost the Trump administration time and money and attention, then where they live and with whom they circulate, they become folk heroes. Oh, did you see what Judge Boasberg did? I know him. That's amazing. He just took on Trump. And the louder and the more obnoxious and the more paralegal, or meaning parallel to the law, or contra law, contra legal, the more famous they get. And in the old days, if you were reversed, if you were a district judge and a circuit court reversed you, or the Supreme Court, that was something that was to your shame. I know my mother was an appellate court. She was a superior court judge and an appellate court, and she made sure that she tried to cross every T and I never to be reversed. And when she was an appellate court, she thought long and hard about reversing a lower court, because she knew that if she did, even if she was correct in doing so, and she did a lot, it was really traumatic to the judge. These people don't care, though. They have no legal reputation they care about. oh, I'm Judge Boasberg, and I got reversed 5 times by the circuit court, and 10 times. No, he did. I'm Judge Boasberg, and I'm a folk hero to the left. I stopped Trump. I delayed Trump. That's how they think.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what the case is.
They won't admit that they are just another form of politics for the Democrat Party and the left.
They look at even worse than that, Jack. They think, well, Highcomb Jeffrey has no power. Sad. Chuck Schumer has no power in the Senate. Joe Biden's out. The Biden family's a joke. We have no presidency. We only have Ketanji Brown and Elena Kagan, and gosh, we don't really have any power there either. We've got Sotomayor. We got 3 women on the court, but they're outvoted, and they're not necessarily brilliant jurists. We don't have any plebiscite action because nobody wants to vote for men in locker rooms or open borders or windmills, but we've got the district judges, and that is our ace in the hole. They are courageously on the line stopping Trump. No one else can do it but them, and they can't do it for very long. They're kind of like the great warriors in a besieged city. They're holding out against the Trump attackers. That's how they view themselves, as tragic heroes. And they don't care about the law. They take an oath to uphold the laws. They don't care about that. They just, if it's Trump's fingerprints on it, it's going to be overturned. They have, as I understand it, there were more challenges and stays to Trump's executive orders in the first 7 months than the entire Obama 8 years that were overturned. That were initially overturned. So that's their only mechanism right now. That and street theater, and doxing ICE agents and putting on kickboxing uniforms and making videos or potty mouth slurs, but maybe firebombing a Tesla dealership, kind of gloating that Donald Trump was almost killed on social media. Oh, he missed. That kind of stuff. That's all they have right now. It's going to be very interesting in the midterm because history says to us that Trump cannot win. Only 4 times in the modern era has the N party been able to gain or hold seats in the first midterm election of their 4-year tenure. And Trump's going to lose. He only has a 7 House margin, so he's going to lose. I'm not sure that's true. If they keep it up, they should just run ads all day long of Jasmine Crockett. It's Jasmine, and then 10,000 people coming across the border. That would be a good ad. And then maybe, I don't know, a guy on the stand getting first place that's obviously a male in a swim contest and say, "You want this? This is what you're going to get." Yeah.
Well, there's a collective freak show element to.
Did you see George Will the other day in an interview with Bill Maher?
Somebody asked me, I hope you bring this up with Victor, but he said, I saw the clip where he said he wanted Mondami to win in New York.
So sounded outrageous, but what he meant, I think, was, although he's very clever, he had kind of a twinkle in his eye. Ostensibly, he meant, I'm willing to sacrifice the welfare of New Yorkers for 4 years under this socialist communist rule, because now and then the American people need to be woken up and get a slap in the face what socialism really does when it takes power. Therefore, it will be a good wake-up call for America. But I don't know if he meant that sincerely, or he's sort of thinking the country's been taken over by Trump and this is what they deserve. So I don't know what he meant, but I take him, at least I want to take him at what I think he meant, not literally.
Yeah, but I have other reasons to be critical of him over the last few years, but we already have a lot of cities in America that are destroyed, burning, hellholes because
all I would say to George is just come out here and live in California.
Yeah,
and
go
look at the
spend
California
the
legislature.
weekend in Oakland. Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think Oakland is? And
Right.
I've been to Oakland. I was driving through Oakland about 3.5 weeks ago, and I didn't know. I thought I was going to use a restroom, so I pulled off an exit on 80, and then I saw, when I pulled into the service station, I thought I was going to fill up a half a tank, and I looked around, and I thought, you know what? This is not wise. And I just took off. I went back on the freeway. It's not a safe place.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
Kind of.
So, George, all you have to do, you don't need Mondame. Jack makes a good point. Just look at what Oakland has become. Look what San Francisco became under London Breed. Look what Karen Bass has done to Los Angeles.
Yeah. Back again with the, this is nothing new about this, or these, we think the AOC leftists are a modern thing, and they are in their way, but what happened to Detroit in 1968? Detroit was the runner-up to be the Olympic city, and then it
had the highest GDP in 1945 of any major city, highest per capita GDP. It was a Renaissance city. That was the real catalyst for the war effort, vehicles and things for World War II. It was a booming city, and it was destroyed. AOC, you mentioned AOC. I just remembered AOC's, one of her community liaisons is under investigation because I think she was a Palestinian or sympathetic to the Palestinians. She posted a social media telling people that this particular Bronx high school, is it Bronx, your place? Or Brooklyn? It is Brooklyn or Bronx?
I think she's in Brooklyn, but
yes,
AOC's from the Bronx.
That it had a large Jewish population, right. And they drove Lexuses, she said, and they were Zionist, and they should go after them. She tried to, tell people to go harass them.
Yes. But her explanation was like Sacramento President Wood in a way. Yeah.
Where was AOC?
Yeah.
I condemn this in the clearest terms. I have no association with this former employee. They're not going to do that.
I feel deeply for Jews in America. I always have, but the difference in the last few years is really troubling. And because of things like that.
You know what I could find really weird? I'm 71, and in my lifetime, I've never been asked if I was Jewish. And in the last 3 years, I've been asked at least 3 times by people at airports or something. Or I've had 5 or 6 emails saying, "Are you Jewish?" Meaning that when I write a column supporting Israel, the first thing they think is not whether the article is well argued or correct or incorrect, but it's a Jew who wrote it. It's really weird. October 7th had the opposite effect of what I thought. I thought it would wake people up to anti-Semitism, but it unleashed all this anger, and it's going to get worse. The Democratic Party, they unleashed this. They let open borders at the southern border, and then there were no visas, audit or background checks from people. Even Mr. Khalil, you remember, that was temporarily in detention to be deported, the Columbia, is that his name, Khalil? Did you see what he said the other day? He said that he concluded that October 7th was necessary. It had gotten to the point, he didn't want to admit it, but he said, looking at it, it just had to happen. I wonder what he would say if a bunch of crazy Jews had broken into Gaza. The IDF had said that we broke down the barrier. It's free raping, killing, torturing time, and we get 6,000 kibbutz residents swarm into Gaza to rape and kill and behead and loot. Wonder what he would say then. It's a no-brainer. Here's Gaza. Every Jew got out in 2005-6. The Bush administration said we support elections, even if Hamas wins. Hamas wins. They threw the Palestinian Authority opposition off rooftops, ethnically cleansed all of them, got them out, sent them back over to the West Bank, said this is ours, and they had 20 years to create an Emirates on the Mediterranean. No Israeli was going to bother them. They had tons of UN food, money, Gulf money. All they had to do was one thing. Just say, you know what? I don't care about Israel. We got Gaza. We have the West Bank. We're going to show the Jews that we can make this paradise on earth, and then we can adjudicate maybe a border change once we are in a position of respect, honor, and wealth. And all they had to do was that. And immediately they took the money, they diverted it, started building the tunnels, and started killing Jews and trying to just destroy things. Everything they touch, they destroy. Hamas.
With the help of the UN.
Touch.
Well, Victor, we've got to get one more topic in, and since we're talking about fights, Jewish military in part here, and you're a classicist, there's a very interesting piece about how does Homer speak to the heart of a modern warrior? And I'm going to raise this with you when we come back from these final important messages.
Where do you keep your birth certificate, passport, and social security card, and vehicle title? Do you know where to find your loan details or the deed to your property? Wouldn't it be nice to easily pull up all your usernames, passwords, and PINs and codes? A knockbox makes organizing your important documents simple. You'll feel great knowing where everything is and that your next of kin will have no problems handling your estate down the road. Each knockbox comes with a comprehensive list that ensures you add everything they'll need to manage your estate when you're gone. From the plans for your beloved pets to the login details for credit cards and subscriptions. If you've got a household, you need a knockbox. Just head over to theknockbox.com and use promo code Victor16 to save 16% off. That's theknockbox.com, promo code Victor16 to save 16% off. Theknockbox.com. Get organized and save. And thanks to Knockbox for sponsoring the Victor Davis Hanson Show.
We're back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show. So, Victor, let's round out today's episode with this piece in the Free Press by Ido Hevrani, How Does Homer Speak to the Heart of the Modern Warrior? And I guess in one sense, it's discussions with Jewish Israeli Defense Forces, kind of closed mouth, can't really talk about what happened. They've seen so much that's so drastic. And then there's some effort to have them read the Iliad. So let me read this from this piece. Another student, a fighter in an elite unit, approached me after the course ended and told me he had participated in several intensive combat rounds that he never spoke of in the processing sessions that followed. I had no words, he said, but in the first processing session we conducted after I finished reading the Iliad, I spoke for the first time. I finally found the words to talk about my experiences. My student was well trained for combat, but was never trained to recognize what war might do to his soul. He had learned the high moral values of the IDF, such as the purity of arms, meaning that soldiers should use their weapons and force only to the necessary extent and must maintain their humanity even during combat. But he learned nothing about the shocking violence required in combat situations. The Iliad gave him a deeper understanding of what human beings are capable of. The Iliad's ending, with Achilles and Priam mourning together, gave him an opening for hope. Even from these depths, one can return from humanity. I thought this was a very powerful article, Victor, and I want to give you a chance to reflect, as you have written several books on the intensity of battle and carnage and of course, the Iliad. What are your thoughts about how the Iliad, what it might mean to the modern soldier?
Well, the Iliad, everybody, is it's an epic poem that was created sometime. I shouldn't say created, but it was handed down among a bard class, maybe a blind bards. orally. It was an oral poem, and it was supposedly right after the collapse of Mycenaean Greece around 1150. There became a mythology. That was when Greek mythology was formed in the so-called Dark Ages. Population decreases. There's a catastrophic invasion or some type of cataclysm, whether it's natural or man-made, and an impoverished successive group of population sees the monuments of Mycenaean Greece, and they can't make them. They don't know who did it. And soon it's kind of like road warrior mythology, apocalyptic. And so they start to, but there is song, so they start romanticizing, exaggerating what the former godlike civilization that they see, the physical remnant, they see Linear B tablets, they're illiterate, they don't know what it is. And these bards are very clever. About a third of their poems, and the Iliad is just one of two that survived along with the Odyssey. And from father to son, or from bard to bard, or however the tradition was handed down, about 20 of these poems surrounded, and that's where Greek mythology was formed. And it's the House of Thebes, the Oedipus cycle, Perseus cycle, Jason's cycle, and the sack of Troy cycles. And we have two poems in the 10th year of the war. The Iliad, about the wrath of Achilles, why the foremost Greek warrior withdraws from the battlefield and pouts, and then the return of Odysseus, one person. We don't have any of the poems about Ajax. We knew they exist. We don't have any about Telemachus, etc. Okay, so in the about 11 weeks of the 10th year, the foremost warrior, Achilles, and again, this is an impoverished society, around 400 years of this has been going on, these tall tales, and each one is pretty gifted. He adds and subtracts to the tradition. And around 700 BC, we have writing come back in, not by Linear B as the original Greeks of the Mycenaean period, but Phoenician letters, alpha, beta, gamma. And Homer is the last guy in the scene. I'm just simplifying, and don't correct me, classicists, because I'm trying to be general. They write what his version is down. So we have Homer because he's the last one who was contemporaneous with written. Once you can write, you destroy the oral tradition, so to speak. So we have his version, and one of his many poems was the Wrath of Achilles. And Iliad comes from Ilion, the Greek word for Troy, and it's about Troy things. And in this poem, it captures the ethos of the early Dark Ages, that you are judged by your martial virtue, how tough you are, how brave you are, how many people you can kill. And Achilles is angry because he is the biggest killer, psychopath almost. He can kill anybody, and he has the gods on his side, Athena sometime. They come down like little kids. Remember, the Greeks don't think the gods are necessarily more moral than humans. They're just bigger and stronger and don't die. Athanatoi. Anyway, the poem is the wrath. He gets angry that Agamemnon, who's more kingly, i.e. he's connected because of birth to the great city at Mycenae, the biggest of the Greek cities at that time, he takes away his concubine. And then Achilles says, okay, I do all the hard work, I kill all the Trojans, and you take my stuff that I capture on the battlefield. That's not fair. I quit. You can't quit. I'm going to quit. If you quit, then Hector, their big champion, will rally the Trojans and get to our ships. And he said, I'll tell you what, when they get to the ships, I made my point. You needed me, and you should have honored me. And then his best friend Patroclus says, oh, please don't do this. Everybody will get killed. Grow up. And he doesn't. So everybody tries to persuade him. They can't. Patroclus gets killed by Hector. Hector thinks he's the toughest guy on the battlefield, the Trojan. He's not. He kills a lot of people. And then Achilles gets angry. Said, okay, they got to the ships, I'm going to go. And he goes on a bloodlust killing spree. And he finally faces down Hector, who now becomes very sympathetic. I know that I can't beat you. I know the gods won't let me beat you. I know you have divine protection. I know you're better than I am, but I'm going to fight you anyway, because for my family, who was watching me on the walls, basically. And Achilles kills him, and then he drags his corpse all around the battlefield, humiliates the body, and then he sees the old man Priam, Hector's father, and he feels bad. And then he gives back the body, and then he becomes sober and judicious and supervises the funeral games among the Greeks and basically grows up. And so what is the lesson of the Iliad? That a warrior who kills and is praised for killing starts to mature and think, you know what, we're all in the same boat. They're killing us, we're killing them. You've got to show some human compassion to the enemy, even though they're the enemy. And he grows up, and that's supposed to historically reflect an addition to the historic oral tradition, where Homer, who was a product of the city-state, which was a complex new moral and political entity, not like the Dark Ages, a herder nomadic culture, and not like the Mycenaeans who spawned the epic tradition, because they probably really did go to Troy in Mycenaean ships and sack it, or something like that. It's a big dispute. But anyway, it shows you that the city-state, the foundation of Western civilization, has now got a more nuanced idea of morality. The old morality, help your friends, hurt your enemies, is no longer operative, at least in the character development of Achilles. And so this soldier always sees that and says, I went into Gaza, and these people did these horrific things, and I started to fight them. And then I looked at the rubble and everything, and I saw some of the people, and I started to get empathy for them, and I realized that they're human too, and this is conflicted, and I need to get some guidance. I read the Iliad, and I saw the same thing happening to Achilles that's happening on me. Does it mean that he became a pacifist? No. Did it mean Achilles then stops? No. He's going to keep fighting and get killed, as you know, shot in the... But that's not in the Iliad. That's in a lost... I think it's called the Persis Iliad, the Persis Ilium in Latin. The Latin translation, it's the destruction of Ilium, the final destroy with the Trojan horse. That's after the death of Achilles. Achilles gets killed by Paris, shoots a lucky arrow, and then Odysseus has to take the city by stealth. Again, city-state, 700 BC, contemporary, I think, padding of the tradition that shows craft, intelligence is as important as physical strength. It's like an onion, the epic tradition. Each layer was a product of a generation. And it's very hard to undo it in modern classical scholarship and determine which is the original Mycenaean story, which was padded during the Dark Ages, and which shows the character development and the sophistication of the last generations before writing took place, widespread. There's a whole science about how to look at artifacts in the Iliad and date them and suggest that the poem is evidence for 1200 BC, 900 BC, 700 BC.
Well, I guess the takeaway before we leave here for me anyway is a warrior can forgive a warrior.
Yes.
And that happened, the Union and the Confederacy after the war, and they were still meeting at Gettysburg, 50 years later.
Yeah, that's a very good point you make, because a lot of people are talking about the statue toppling and changing military base names and all of this. And they don't quite understand that from 1865 all the way to the 1920s, there was a lot of animosity in the country, and people did not forgive the Southerners for being secessionists, and the Southerners said, we were not secessionists, we were fighting for our state. Only 3% of our state owned slaves, but you were invading our territory. It was hatred. And the federal government tried to step in. I mean, every political party tried to balance the ticket with a Southerner, especially the Democratic Party, because nobody voted Republican because that was associated with Lincoln's victory in the Civil War for 100 years. And nobody wanted to invest in the South. But as I said the other day, it's very ironic. The South became the North, and the North became the South. The North became racially obsessed. The North became statist. The North destroyed the middle class, and the New South doesn't seem to care about race, and blacks find it more conducive to live in the South again than the North. And there's a middle class in Florida and Texas, Tennessee, in a way there's not in California or, Michigan. So it's ironic, but my point is that's why all those statues are there that people now with modern 21st century postmodern morality condemn, but they were there for a purpose, to heal the wounds of the country. That's why you have Robert E. Lee, everywhere, or Stonewall Jackson. It wasn't because they were saying they were perfect people. They were just saying, got to give the South something. All those Westerns, remember, Jack, that the Searchers, John Wayne is kind of a Southerner. And Alan Ladd, remember in Shane, he's a Southern. He says, "You're no good Yankee, no good Yankee liar," doesn't he, to Jack Palance?
Actually, some of the John Ford, the trilogy, Tyree is a Confederate officer.
In Hollywood, it's very funny, everybody, because Hollywood was left-wing to the core, communist socialist. But in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, they stood up for the underdog. And they thought that the Southerners were impoverished, they were misunderstood, and all of their movies showed that the heroic gunfighter was from the South. And he had skills that the Northerners won the war through numbers and money, but the Southerners, they were kind of... And that was even in the Clint Eastwood movie, remember?
Oh, sure. Good, the Bad, the Ugly.
The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and also, the outlaw Josie Wales. He was a Southerner that was tormented by Northerners, not to mention Gone with the Wind, so that it was kind of Hollywood's rewriting of history to support the underdog. And even when I was, in high school and early college, Joan Baez had a big hit. She took that band song, The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, changed, I think, a couple. And she became left-wing Joan Baez, anti-war protesters, was singing The Night They Drove Dixie Down, which was a love song to the Confederacy. And then all of a sudden they said, nope, they banned that. I think they didn't play that anymore on radio.
Someday we'll sing it, Victor. Hey, we've got to conclude here because I've tortured you and everyone, yes. But I just want to read one comment from one of our listeners. This is off of YouTube. There's so many comments. We try to read them all, folks. This is from Gail Talman 122. Victor, I was born in 1950, and I've never listened so close to anyone talking on a political platform as I have you, and the history tidbits you throw in are so interesting. I hope you continue on this delightful and enlightening conversation. Your views are going up because I have 13 grandchildren and 14 great-grandchildren who I tell continuously, you must listen to Victor Davis Hanson. They come back and tell me they are listening and love your show. Well, the grandsons say they enjoy it. Keep doing what you do. This is from Gail in Tennessee Chronicles. So that's just a lovely.
I'll have to get my granddaughter to listen to it. She's 15. She doesn't even know what I do, I think.
What do you do for a living, Grandpa? Victor, you've been terrific. Grandpa? Yeah, I want to thank people who write me and say thank you for doing Civil Thoughts. That's a free weekly email newsletter I do for the Center for Civil Society. So if you go to civilthoughts.com, sign up. Comes out every Friday, 14 recommended readings. You're going to love it. It's free. VictorHanson.com. Do subscribe. Victor, you've been terrific, as ever. Thanks very much for all the wisdom you shared. Thanks, folks, for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening.